Welcome back to Small Changes, Big Shifts. I'm Dr. Michelle Robin here with my co-host Bayleigh Soza. And, I've been thinking a lot about thyroid disease. And you'd be thinking, gosh, Michelle, why are you thinking about thyroid disease? Well, I'm guessing that many of you either have thyroid disease, have a friend, or are worried about one of your kids or grandkids having thyroid issues. And so I wanted to invite in one of my personal doctors and friends, Dr. Alicia Johnson, to talk about thyroid disease and talk about what it is. So first of all, Dr. Alicia, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And then tell our listeners a little bit about your background.
So I am a naturopathic doctor. So that means I combine the best of holistic and conventional medicine and look for the root cause of conditions. And primarily I work with endocrine conditions. So thyroid, women's hormones, weight gain, fatigue, anxiety, insomnia, just a lot of the things that women tend to experience as we live our busy lives and don't get a lot of help with. So my job is to kind of investigate why that's happening and how we can help.
Well, we could probably talk for about 5 hours. Let's kind of narrow it down to thyroid. What is the thyroid?
So the thyroid is a gland in your neck, and basically it drives the metabolism of every cell in your body.
Every cell.
Every cell. So it affects your gallbladder, it affects your hair, your skin, your ovaries, it affects everything. And so your brain, people talk about the thyroid with regard to weight gain, but fatigue, constipation, gallbladder, liver problems, pretty much anything you can think of is going to be affected by slower cellular metabolism.
And everybody has a thyroid if they've not had it removed.
Correct.
Would you say it's the most important part of the endocrine system or just a vital part?
It's a vital part, everything. I think of it kind of like an orchestra where everything has its part. And if one thing isn't working, then none of it works.
Mhm. Why do you think thyroid disease is rampant in our country?
If we think about the periodic table and all of the things that are in a row, so iodine, fluoride, chlorine, bromide, so this row of compounds, they're all very similar. And so the thyroid uses iodine to function, but we're exposed to all of these other things all the time. And so we think that one of the reasons that people have trouble with their thyroid so much is the thyroid is trying to ingest chlorine, bromide from pesticides, fluoride from our water. So all of these different things will slowly damage this gland. Radiation damages it. So a lot of people come to me and ask me if we can find some natural way to make their thyroid work. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. If it's not working because of some exposure that person couldn't control, then we find ways to help. If it's not working because of something they can control, then we find ways to help.
Well, I love the approach that you take being a naturopathic doctor. And so for our listeners who have never heard of a naturopathic doctor and maybe doesn't know what it would be like to come to see you, can you kind of explain how your naturopathic approach really helps, one, the thyroid, but two, the overall endocrine system?
Because it's a more holistic approach, all that means is that if you came in, I would say, tell me what's going on. And you would tell me your story. What's happening in your life? What do you eat? How do you live? What doesn't feel right? What symptoms are you having? I would test you in a very detailed way to try to figure out what the reason is for your thyroid symptoms. And then we would put together a plan. We would talk about whether or not you can eat differently, whether or not if you have an immune system problem affecting your thyroid, can we use antioxidants? If you have some kind of stress or blood sugar related condition, can we fix that first and see if the thyroid gets better? It's really just looking at everything and saying, okay, what do we have control over? What do we not have control over? And if there's something where like thyroid medication is the only treatment, then we still go that direction. It's just kind of getting to the root cause of why you don't feel right and trying to pick the right thing.
So could you have thyroid issues with your thyroid numbers being normal?
Yes. So, and that's a really common situation. So we have a lot of things that we can test, but people with Hashimoto's or autoimmune thyroiditis, they often have thyroid symptoms without abnormal labs, or at least the labs that we normally check. You can also have perfect labs and have all of the symptoms. And that can happen, for example, if your thyroid hormone is bound to something else. So you have enough hormone, but you can't use it. And that happens in conditions like PCOS, people who are pre-diabetic. And sometimes medications can cause the thyroid to bind. So we call that euthyroid syndrome, where you have all of the symptoms, but it doesn't look like it and it responds to treatment.
Thinking about thyroid type disorders or diagnoses, give me some examples of what they would be.
So hyperthyroidism is actually much less common. So people with Hashimoto's or autoimmune thyroiditis, their immune system will kind of go after the thyroid gland. And as those cells are damaged, it releases thyroid hormone. And so people get overstimulated by that thyroid hormone. And sometimes it just happens in little bursts. So people will say, I'm gaining weight, I'm tired, I'm spacey, I don't feel right. And then sometimes I'm super agitated and I'm hot and I can't sleep. That's a very common pattern with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And eventually their thyroid gets damaged enough to the point where it doesn't work. And that's usually when they come in, is after the ups and downs. Graves is a condition of just kind of more severe hyperthyroidism. And so that's just like one day somebody is losing weight, they're hot, their eyes are bugging out because their metabolism is running so hard they don't look normal anymore. They can have hair loss. That can be a life-threatening condition. And I've still seen people with those conditions respond to holistic treatment. But you have to be careful. You have to make sure they understand that it's serious. Normally, in my opinion and experience, those types of thyroid conditions normally happen after a major stress. Usually emotional with Hashimoto's, in my experience. They have some big emotional thing that happens and then it triggers it. Graves, after a car accident, after an illness, there's something that kicks it into gear and then it doesn't turn off with. So,
I love working here and I get to work with both of you guys. And I think one of the things that I just appreciate about our docs is the overall theme of everybody wants to get to the root cause. And everybody is also still open to other treatments and other modalities of if the holistic way isn't always the right path, we're open to that. And I think that's kind of a common misconception when you talk about traditional healthcare and holistic healthcare is they think it's this either or. And really a lot of times it blends together. And in your practice, you blend it together often and you see results all the time. And so it's beautiful for our listeners to be able to hear it that way. And so for somebody like me who's in, my 20s and asking, why would I even care about my thyroid or what should I be looking out for? To those people in the younger generation, what are some of the practical steps that we can do to be, one, aware of if something's off, and then two, to help prevent some of these long-term issues?
in my practice, a lot of the women that I see will bring their daughters in or the younger people in their family. And we actually start with detailed thyroid testing, hormone testing, stress hormone testing, antioxidant testing, nutrients. We look at all of it usually as soon as they start going through puberty because we can just do it once a year. And then, just keeping an eye on it. Because when I first started practicing, most people would only come in if it was just an absolute catastrophe. And now, it's like the next generation of women who say, my daughter's not going to go through that for 20 years before they get help. And so, we find something when it's a hill to climb and not a mountain. And a lot of women will come in when it's the catastrophe and we find some number that's way off. And they're like, how long has this been like this? I don't know. Maybe forever. There's no way for me to know, but this didn't happen yesterday. And so just watching it can help a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one thing too that, I'm guilty here of not always knowing my numbers, right? I think oftentimes people don't realize how powerful it is to know your numbers from a lab perspective and understanding that you maybe feel well or the things that you think are happening are just normal symptoms and it's just what you feel of everyday stress. But there's sometimes something deeper and having that preventative piece is huge. And so I love that you're seeing the generational change start to happen in your own practice with moms starting to say, you know what, my daughter's not even going to go through this, and here's how we're going to make sure of it. What are some things that you are excited for with people catching these symptoms or these numbers earlier in life, knowing that they're going to be able to avoid some of these things?
It's a good question. I'm really excited to see how many women in their early 40s or even early 30s are coming in and saying, I'm having this symptom that I think is a perimenopausal symptom. I feel anxious. I can't sleep. I have this thing that's really disrupting my life. And some of these symptoms can be really severe for people. And for the first time, people are talking about it and they're asking for help. And all of a sudden, the pendulum has swung where instead of me saying, you're actually experiencing things that a lot of people feel, and we have solutions and we can intervene and it's going to be okay. You're not the only one. Now, it's almost starting to be where it's a minority that people don't know that other women are experiencing the same things. And there's a lot of shame around the things that women experience, whether it's their brain fog or their anxiety or their insomnia or their weight gain or just behavioral changes. They're finally realizing that it's happening to other people and asking for help a lot younger.
So we talked about thyroid. You give us a little bit of education about it. There's a way to look at it holistically. Ideally, people start knowing their numbers at an earlier age to kind of get some good baseline. It's amazing to me that we like baseline our teeth, but we don't baseline our labs or baseline our x-rays. And you mentioned car accidents. And from a chiropractor, I think, why would a car accident cause a thyroid issue?
Yeah.
And I think about the nerves that come out of that area right around the thyroid. So what are some common things that cause issues with the thyroid? What are some of the lifestyle things that people have control over that can impact it?
So blood sugar changes can affect the thyroid. Blood sugar kind of affects the availability of thyroid hormone. And because of that, it does have an impact. Even like high estrogen, low progesterone, or changes in those levels can throw off the thyroid. So you see problems with thyroid sometimes during or after pregnancy. Thyroid problems can throw off the female hormones too. So there's a lot of relationship there. Stress hormones can change the thyroid and vice versa. It's all related. And so that's where a lot of that does come back to the kind of foundations of holistic medicine, eating real food, trying not to have too much sugar, good balanced macronutrients, exercise. Most of the endocrine system would do a lot better if we ate healthy, if we didn't eat a lot of sugar, if we have routine meals. So I know fasting is a big trend right now, but just eating regular meals and not starving yourself, doing a normal amount of exercise. So being mobile and being active, but not necessarily high intensity training. Those things have a big impact. And the good thing about those things is they're all actually, you can see them on the labs. So if somebody's training super, super hard and it's messing up their thyroid, it has a specific pattern, and you can say, you're exercising too hard. And the person always will say, no, I'm not. And I say, well, your body's telling you this, not you. It's just, it is what it is. You have to do less, or we have to medicate you because it's a result of what you're doing. Same thing with fasting. Those things are visible in the labs. And so we can see patterns with different lifestyle choices or different lifestyles where the thyroid changes and we can intervene.
In our medicine, we talk about people are sick for two reasons only, toxic or deficient.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have, I know you have some kids and boys, right? 3 boys, not to say all boys. So I know you have 3 boys. And what are some things that you're instilling in them to take care of their thyroid? Because it's not just a woman's disease, it's also a male disease.
Yeah. When they were little, it was always, only glass, no plastic. Those things are easy in the house, and, reducing or not using chemicals with fragrances and, avoiding the brominated and chlorinated pesticides and sprays and chemicals and that kind of stuff in the house. Those are the things that we can control. Making sure they have access to healthy food. In my house, what that looks like is not what can't you eat, but just having the good stuff there, encouraging what to eat, not what not to eat. I think that's really important in this field, is kind of avoiding shame around food and focusing more on like, eat more of this. And so what that looks like in practical life for me is I have one of those refrigerators with the pull-out drawer. And so their whole lives, I've always had eye level food. So olives, nuts, carrots, just easy when they're grazing, easy to reach and grab foods. And I focus a lot more on that than like, don't do this thing. And the nice thing is that if they do the thing that's not good for them, it doesn't feel good because they're not used to it. And then they naturally just don't want to do things that they're not used to.
It's one of the greatest blessings, I'd say, for me in motherhood is giving them this foundation, right? They don't have to, quote, go on a diet because it's the food that they've always eaten. It's what they've always been exposed to. And it comes from just when you know better, you do better for the next generation. And your boys are so lucky, but your clients are so lucky as well, too, because when you are seeing different people in different diseases or when they're coming in their well-being journey, whether it's at the critical stage or the preventative stage, either way, you're picking up on new skills to to be able to pour into that next young woman or next young man who's coming to you and looking for results or looking for guidance in their journey. And so as we're kind of wrapping up today, if you were to give somebody one small change that they can do, if there's only one tip that they could focus on that's going to help benefit their thyroid or their overall endocrine system, what is kind of that pillar rule for you?
I think the thing that we have control over that's super simple, we can snack on those little seaweed snacks and get iodine, or we can make sure we're getting iodine in our diet from shellfish or iodized salt. And we can eat Brazil nuts to get enough selenium. We can eat, beans and legumes to get zinc, and those kind of basics just to at least get the nutrition our thyroid needs. Those are really simple things that everyone can do.
Before we officially wrap up the show today, and I can have you pull a quote, tell me about the importance of vitamin D in the thyroid.
When I think of vitamin D in the thyroid, I think of vitamin D being a really good regulator to avoid inflammation and abnormal thyroid function in that department. So with inflammatory thyroid conditions, vitamin D, probiotics, and glutathione and vitamin A are four things that will have a regulating effect on pretty much anyone with an inflamed thyroid, just because they're all great immune system modulators and super safe.
I just think about vitamin D being such a foundation from my lens, but you know a lot more about it than I do. Somebody has vitamin D deficiency. What are some things that could be going on in their life and why it's so important to supplement?
A lot of people with vitamin D deficiency present just with depression or fatigue. And if it's low enough, they just really don't feel well or they get sick easily. But we know from research that if you look at every condition, so all-cause mortality, every way that you can die, every single condition improves with normal vitamin D levels. And it's not a vitamin, it's a hormone that regulates our immune system, our bone metabolism, all of these different things. But when, because most of us don't have normal vitamin D because we don't have that all day sun exposure, basically every system you can possibly test suffers from that.
So it's a foundation. It's healthier, then most likely they'll get healthier in general.
Yeah. And it's a very inexpensive way to just make sure you make every single system healthier.
Okay, so as we wrap up the show, to our listeners, possibly know your numbers. If you feel like you don't want to do that or you feel like you already know them, if you're thinking about eating more whole food, regulating your blood sugar, managing your vitamin D, maybe eating some Brazil nuts for some selenium, which is good for the thyroid. I love learning from you. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm a quote nerd. You might know that about me. So I'm going to have you pull a quote and see if it speaks to you today.
Okay. Having a rough day, place your hand over your heart. Feel that? It's called purpose. You're alive for a reason. Don't give up. Joyce Meyer.
Does that speak to you today?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Friends, thanks for joining us today. Bayleigh, anything else you want to say to wrap up the show?
No, I think what a fun show. I think it's, the beauty of this Small Changes, Big Shifts podcast is we're going to go from inspirational stories to educational stories, because on this journey of whole person well-being, you need all of it. You need the facts and the data and the science to help you understand why you should care about your thyroid. And then you need the stories of people who have overcome, so that way you feel inspired to do the same. And so, Dr. Alicia, thank you for joining us today and bringing such great information to our listeners. If they want to stay in touch with you, what's the best way to follow the work that you're doing?
My website is aspirehealthkc.com, and that's the best place to find me.
Perfect. So we'll put that in the show notes for our listeners who want to connect. And she is here in Kansas City doing great work.
Well, thanks for listening to the show. We believe that by taking time to be inspired and also get educated, that you will put the odds in your favor. And so, hey, until next week, we're sending you really big heart hugs. Have a phenomenal week. And hey, get your vitamin D, get some sunshine.